The Lincoln Forum is presenting this conversation tonight. I'm Roe Conn from WGN Radio, Craig Wall from ABC7, Marianne Ahern from NBC5, and Rick Pearson from Chicago Tribune and WGN is here. And the Lincoln Forum hosts monthly events for all of you who are, I don't know if, obviously everybody's been to one of these already so far. It is where influential and engaging minds in politics and policy speak on important issues. I don't know why I'm here. They provide a platform. Moderator. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let me just start with this, because let's start with the media side, and then we'll get to the inside politics of all the races that are coming on here. Do you think that media is covering the circus or the substance here, Craig Wall?
I think we're guilty of covering both, because the reality is that there's substance to be covered, but as we've seen in a number of, for example, the gubernatorial debates, sometimes it is the circus that makes the headlines. You look at the yelling and the screaming over one another that the candidates have done in the primaries and more recently between Rauner and Pritzker. And sometimes there's not a whole lot of substance to report because there's been so much screaming. It's like that becomes the story.
We just had Bruce Rauner on last hour, and he was, and this is a tough situation. Obviously, all the polling shows that he's down by double digits. He's just imploring people to hang in there. And one of the questions I wanted to get to with him, and he was very honest about the answer, which is, he's a smart, diligent guy who took his success and he wanted to do something in the public forum. He wanted to do something in the public sector. And he, basically for the last 4 years, it's been a very rough run. It's been very, very difficult. And at this moment in this campaign, he started to go with what the campaign consultants are telling him to do. He's going with, more of the dramatic kind of provocative and gutter politics kind of stuff that goes on. And I guess the question, I'll take it right to you, Rick. I mean, for a guy like that, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. It goes against brand.
Yeah, except that I'm not sure that he's listening to consultants. I think this is truly his gut. Remember, this guy came into office and said, I've been a success at everything I've ever done. And this is now the last throes of that ego going, to air an ad where you have an officiant at a marriage ceremony, you throw the F-bomb down. That's not normal. And in any other place, that would be the kiss of death for a candidate. He did my show yesterday. It's the first time he's ever been on. First time they've had an open invite. He's doing virtually anything and everything to get as much media attention as he can, which to me is an acknowledgement of where he knows he is in the polls. But when he talked about the previous question about circus and substance, I had him on the show. I had J.B. Pritzker on the show separately before that. And off the air, as soon as it was over, I couldn't get a shower fast enough. The mud, the lack of, and I wanted to have a
on only his part or both?
Both of them. I absolutely am. I'm on both of them. And if I came away not having known either one of these people, I don't know how I'd vote. The attempts to get the substance, there is no substance. There is neither of them.
Because they revert to the pat answers time and time.
Well, and even when they don't have the answer, then they revert to, well, the other guy's, right. He's a liar and a crook. And
have we ever gotten answers, Marianne?
Well, we did get some answers from Rauner the first time. That's why he won. But he was also had no record. So now you have a record. You're running with your 4-year record and saying, okay, please, I want one more chance. And that has folks saying, well, wait a second. What did you do for those 4 years? Madigan is certainly such a big figure in this race. But did his principles outweigh making a deal? And I get it that the budget, Madigan could have gotten a budget. He didn't need Rauner. He had a majority in both houses, House and Senate. But folks say, wait a second. We needed a budget. You went too long. Why did this happen? And where was the compromise? And yet, then they also say, oh, J.B. Pritzker, wait a second. You spent $170 million to be the governor. What are you thinking?
He says it's worth it.
Is it a little overkill? I mean, come on.
Okay. Let me stop right there. Let's take ourselves out of the sort of a populist, or what we used to consider to be a populist kind of position, which was, well, if you're spending your own money, why would you throw your money at that? There are people who've been very successful, and they look at government, and they see government as sometimes an impediment to things. They see government as at least wasteful, and sometimes trying to do one thing, and it turns out not doing it very well, so they want to go in and change. They think they've got a better solution. Isn't that kind of what the founders considered here in terms of public service, and people from, whether it's, the House of Lords or the House of Commons, they go and they do their job?
Where are the answers, though? Okay, so tell us about the graduated income tax. He won't even tell us what someone makes if they're middle income. He won't answer that question.
JB.
Yes.
Right.
So you're spending the $170 million and you want it so bad. Can you give us a few answers before you're elected?
Because he knows if he gives any kind of answers that will be used against him, maybe eventually in a court of law, since he is an Illinois governor, but more importantly, it will be used against him in every campaign ad.
Well, yeah, and as you say, you've seen that happen time and time again. Rauner was the one who stepped into it big when he gave the comments, "I'm not in charge," right? And that came back to haunt him. I can see that every time we talk to them, they're couching their answers because they don't want to say that one thing that's going to come back and bite them. And it's frustrating, but that's the whole mantra. It's like, I don't want to say something that's going to come across as stupid, even if I'm not going to be actually giving an answer.
Or they stay to their program talking points. I mean, there are some people that I used to call the Kirk Dillard answer when Kirk Dillard ran for governor and, of course, state senator. And when he was himself, he was fine. But you would put a microphone in front of him and he would start lawyer his comments, and you could literally see the smoke coming out of his ears and the gears turning as he tried to make sure he didn't say anything that could offend just anybody else. And it was the worst interview you'd ever get in the world.
Well, I think that's where these guys get caught up, right? That they want to go out and they want to be themselves, and their power of their own personality has done very, very well in the private sector. Right. Especially in a situation like JB's, where, JB was generationally wealthy, sort of like the president is. We'll get to him in just a few minutes. Don't worry about it. I'm going to get to that. Concern yourselves. But it seems to me that people who have done well in the private sector expect people to go, yeah, okay, I'm going to go along with you because they agree with you.
But it's not the same. And that's the problem and when you have somebody of Bruce Rauner's stature and head of a equity firm and used to cutting deals, the deals you cut in the business side are completely different than how government works.
And if you don't like the deal, you can cut it off or walk away from it because you're the one calling the shots. But
the effects of not making that deal don't have the ramifications that it does, the budget impasse.
Do you think Mike Madigan's going to make some deals with J.B. Pritzker? He's going to be the same that he was to Rauner.
Well, but they're going to have more of a similar agenda so that it won't be the same,
But will they?
I don't know. I think he flips a little and he becomes the Rauner. He's going to become the guy that says, whoa, wait.
Historically, Mike Madigan had better relationships with Republican governors because Republican governors pretty much dominated. From 1983 was when Madigan became speaker, and you had
Thompson,
Edgar, Ryan. You had a generation
the
there.
value of working with.
But you also had a different kind of republicanism there, too. Is that, and even though people worried when Jim Edgar took over after 16 years of Jim Thompson, because Edgar was from downstate, and people from Chicago were concerned that, here's this guy from downstate, he doesn't get Chicago. There were a lot of fights between Rich Daley and Jim Edgar, but it didn't mean that government didn't work.
Yeah, right.
Why isn't government working now, do you think, in Illinois? Is there sort of the national overlay in the way that we look at, we're retrained even as Chicagoans, because I grew up in this city. Republicans, the first Republican I ever met in real time was when I went to college. I had never really, at my age, there was one kind of crazy kid in school that had the crazy eyes that said he was a Republican, but I think he was more of a shooter. And so I didn't really know people because everybody was, you're not used to the thought of that entire logic stream of conservatism. And then when you actually see it downstate and the way that Illinois applied it, I always thought when you have a guy like Edgar, or you had a guy like Jim Thompson, who was really a business guy, he was like the original business guy. But Jim Edgar was, I think, a wonderful vessel for conservative thought and for being a Republican governor in a kind of a purple state.
That was very much a purple. It was a bellwether state for many years. But
a great representative of that.
Well, I always told people when I was doing the national presidential campaigns, and for the most part, those people are based out of Washington, and that's what they do. And I would say when I'd get up to the end of the trail, it's like, goodbye, I'm going back to Chicago and back to some normalcy because of the politics of how the federal government was and how paralyzing that was. And when Jan Schakowsky ran for Congress, I said that's a perfect place for her to go because of her, very progressive points. She'd be perfect there, not in Springfield. That's not how it worked there because you had a government that worked there. But what we've seen,
all did business together.
But what we've seen is that politics of it's truly the winner take all politics is what it's all about. That's what it is.
What has happened, what was it now? It's been 8 years or so ago that Wisconsin, Indiana had some of these union fights. Then Illinois said, we're not doing that. We're not doing any of that. But there was some changes made and adapted to what's going on in the world. And wait a second, if you retire at 55, hold on, I'm not sure we can pay for you for the next 30 years. So Illinois took forever with Rauner to say, we need to regroup here, guys. And now he's been hit with this, block at every turn.
Well, the test pilot, the canary in that coal mine was workers' compensation. I don't want to get, too deep in the weeds here.
You don't want to talk about causation?
Well, we will in just the second half hour. We'll be that. If I'm drinking more, I might actually be able to pull that off. But the idea that they were going to start with the whole workman's comp issue that other states have already addressed, and because some of the workman's comp issues, if you're a business owner in Illinois, it's onerous compared to Illinois or compared to Indiana or Wisconsin if you do have a workman's comp claim. And so that was scaring a lot of businesses, and they wanted to tap that down. And it took a long time. They still didn't get everything that they wanted out of it, but it's better for business than it had been. And then after that fight was over, it was such a bruising fight, they didn't want to get into the union issues. They couldn't take on the teachers union. They couldn't take on AFSCME. They couldn't take on SEIU and Teamsters. The main unions that are at play here. And the question really becomes, if you can do it in all these other states, why couldn't you do it in Illinois? Is it really the influence of Chicago? Marianne Ahern.
Absolutely, it is the influence of Chicago. And look what's happening even in Chicago, the mayor's race. Rahm Emanuel is punting on the police contract, the fire contract, and he's not punting yet, but the next mayor will face not only those two, but the teacher's contract, because they're all going to face the next mayor within months of that person taking office.
I do want to tell a story about Marianne being chased around a desk by Rahm Emanuel, but we'll get to that in just a few minutes. Before we do that, Craig, do you think that as we look at the federal situation here in terms of how Washington is behaving is going to be how Illinois is eventually going to be behaving? We've always kind of been a little bit apart from it, but the cable news is so ubiquitous now that we're tribalizing, even in Chicago, where we never, Illinois Republicans are always a little different than federal Republicans, national Republicans. Maybe further downstate, not so much, but certainly up north of I-80.
Well, I think that the whole scenario we're seeing play on a federal level, with everything becoming so polarized on either side, is having a ripple effect everywhere, to be honest. I mean, and we're seeing it come here. I don't think it's as bad here in Illinois, but we are seeing, Chicago being played against the rest of the state. I mean, it's a tale of two states, right? And so it's just, so many people get caught up in what's going on federally that there's a poisoning on the other side. So nobody can look at somebody with a different political view and actually have a conversation with them anymore, because they've become not somebody with a different political view, but they've become the enemy. And so when you start viewing people in that vein, you don't have conversations, things don't get done. And that, I think, is having a ripple effect down here in our governor's race and in other races as well, that people are getting painted as evil on the other side, and both sides are doing it.
So Bruce Rauner goes down to Carbondale, where the president is.
Murfreesboro.
So,
Same-
no.
Anybody here from Carbondale or Murfreesboro?
17th Street Barbecue in Murfreesboro.
That explains a lot, by the way. I find it really interesting that they never got in the room together, though, and that Trump didn't mention him when he was on stage, and that Rauner was there, but not a part of the grander circus that is a Trump rally. And what does that say? If Rauner had already made the decision to kind of go down the social conservative route and try to sort of parallel the president a little bit here, he never crossed the lane. What do you think of that?
I think it was a tremendous failure by Bruce Rauner. This was something that they were going back and forth on for several days about, do I finally, more than a week, do I embrace him? Do I not? The rifts of that primary where he alienated social conservatives, primarily downstaters, have not healed. And so here again, it's what have I got to lose? So I'm going to go. So he goes, and I think basically what he got rebuffed. I think the Trump people, they didn't give him the time of day. And in fact, there was an Illinois Republican who's running for governor who was mentioned by Trump on stage. A guy named John Cox, who was a goofball when he ran as a perennial candidate in Illinois, is the Republican nominee in California. And Donald Trump mentions him on the stage. And not Bruce Rauner. I
just wonder, though, if in Murfreesboro, that's who he was playing to. He wasn't playing to the folks in Chicago. So are the folks in Murfreesboro talking about it, or did they say, oh, the governor was there? I mean, obviously Trump is more popular in Murfreesboro than Rauner is, and he needed to show up there. I don't know. I just don't know if they care as much as the folks in Chicago care.
And I don't even think Rauner wanted to be on stage with Trump. I think he wanted to go down there to play to the people in Southern Illinois, to show up, to hang out with them. But everything I was hearing, he wanted to meet with them privately, but had no interest in being with them on stage because that's a bad image that could be played against him. So it's all part of this.
You know what? If you're getting photographed at a Trump rally, it doesn't matter if you're getting photographed with Trump. You're standing next to everybody wearing MAGA hats.
Isn't it?
Same thing.
Isn't it worth the risk though? Because isn't one of the problems that Bruce Rauner has right now, and the reasons it's double digits as opposed to a much closer race, is you do have a third party candidate here.
I'm not so sure that Sam McCann is that much of an influence, and if he is, it's more again downstate with the more socially conservative Republicans.
Isn't it a good plan if you're in Murfreesboro?
Yeah.
Isn't it a better move to get up on stage and?
Absolutely. I mean, his explanation was that he wanted to go originally and go thank the president and for various things. A guy whose name he wouldn't mention for 2.5 years. I want to go, and then he goes. He doesn't even get the thank you. He doesn't get acknowledged at all, and acknowledges that he left and watched the end of the speech somewhere off-site.
I think Trump is as successful as he is in in the segment in American, which he is. There's a certain American archetype that he is really playing well to, right? And I think it's because he is completely naked when he gets on stage with them. These rallies aren't about grander media. These rallies really are about those 20,000 people or 3,000 people or whatever it is, whatever they can accommodate. And it's an each one teach one thing. He whips them up so well. He makes them feel so good and so connected to something that they go out and it's an each one teach one. And then they take other people. He's basically the Grateful Dead, essentially, as a politician.
I think more World Wrestling Federation.
Well, it's the same. Sort of the same, yeah. But it's crazy because the economics around it, when we were covering the conventions, you got those t-shirt hawkers. And the one thing there's a whole caravan of people who travel the country selling merchandise of the president. And Democrats don't get that. They don't get that. There are some, but it's not the same stuff. And these people, literally are on the roads, and there's an entire economy to him going out and being on tour like this. And it's fascinating.
What was the one we were at Elkhart? Elkhart, Indiana.
Yeah.
And there were tons of Chicago people who drove to Elkhart because he's not coming to Chicago.
Right.
So, and
Didn't work out well last time he was there.
That's where we saw the T-shirt hawkers. They would set up their little tents in the empty parking lots.
And they were parked. It was,
and they're coming from all over.
They were tailgating.
Florida, I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're from everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're fascinating. I did a whole story on them in Cleveland when they were there for the convention. Because there's a question about, okay, who are you people? Where did you come from? How are you getting the merchandise? Are you getting the merchandise from? Are the Trump people helping you with that? Are they not? Is this you guys making all this stuff up yourself? And it turns out mostly it is. They're coming up with lines and whatever. And I'm wondering now, who wants a piece of this? How much of it's made in China? There are a lot of questions about what it is that they're doing, but it's fascinating because they're in on it. And I think it is really about the performance art of what he's doing. And is that the future of American politics?
Well, and that's why I referenced it like World Wrestling Federation. I mean, it is a show. It's a production, and it's to appeal to a certain fandom. And at the very same time, it's also kind of, I think, a rejuvenating thing for him. That show of affection is something that he desperately wants to have and wants to see, and that he doesn't get that.
But he gets
Washington
back.
D.C.
I think there's
absolutely, but that's the show. That's the showman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
he
is at heart. He is at heart a showman, and he loves to be. My ratings were great, and he mentions even in Murfreesboro about somebody being an apprentice. Oh, I love that word, the apprentice. And it's always those kinds of things.
One of his surrogates was on TV this week, or I guess on Sunday, and they were saying, "Well, we put on a good show last night talking about Murfreesboro.
We put on a good show.
We put on a good show last night because the question was, in the hours after this horrifying mass shooting in Pittsburgh, how can he go out and do that? Again, back to the empathy gene. How do you do it? Well, he addressed it at the top, but it without saying the show must go on, the guy then took a beat on another sentence and then went, but we put on a good show.
That actually was our headline, was that, despite national tragedy, Trump show goes on.
Right. And they were asked the question, wait, is this a show? I think it was Dana Bash asked, was at CNN. Dana Bash, is this just a show? Well, no. It's actually, you know who it was? Now it's coming back to me. It's the guy who runs, the social media, now the campaign director.
Oh, right.
For
the Trump campaign.
Yeah, for Trump 2020.
It's interesting though. You see some politicians who can naturally come across empathetic, whether it's just a put on, whether it's a good act, but it seems natural.
Mostly a put on, by the way.
But it at least comes across as more genuine. With Trump, it seems like it's really hard for him to go there, and maybe that's just because he's more awkward. I think it's so much of a performance, but it seems awkward when he's trying to be empathetic. And the interesting thing, you guys probably caught this in Murfreesboro. He at one point said, I think I'm just going to tone it down a little bit tonight. Are you guys all right with that? And there were cheers from people saying, no, that they didn't want him to tone it down.
They wanted the show. They wanted to get riled up for a show, and they wanted the show.
Yeah.
He mentioned Hillary at a point, and it was the lock her up. Mm-hmm. He mentioned Pocahontas. He mentioned the media.
Turn around, they're right over there.
He went back to the usual, all the things that they watch on TV, they wanted to be a part of and see it for themselves.
Mm.
So are we doomed? I mean, in terms of the media, let's talk about the media for a moment here. Can the media tell the story without becoming the story when you have Donald Trump and the White House communications team, now led by Bill Shine, who was the former head of Fox, was very good at figuring out the exact angle and knowing exactly where the conservative media stream has been for 20 years and knowing what triggers work and what click-throughs work and all that. Is there a way that mainstream media, that media that's trying to cover a story in a traditional sense, can cover the story and not become the story?
It's so tough. I sit at my desk sometimes, and I have a little television there I'll have MS or CNN or whatever on, and sometimes I'm like, wow, I can't believe they just said that, that's what they're talking about today. And they're just saying what they say. And I think no wonder everybody thinks we're all part of that, that we all have a preconceived view, because that's not my job. My job is just tell us what happened today. Here's what happened in politics today. I went here, I talked to this person and that person, and here you go. It's becoming harder and harder to do that.
And I think one thing that I think we're seeing from the media side is with Trump ratcheting and he's always brewing for a fight, and it almost has given the media, and these are more like the commentators at night who aren't the straight reporters who are covering the stories, but the commentators who are a different breed, right? But it's given them almost a license to take their response up to a note that's going to match where the president's.
Jim Acosta is an excellent example of that at CNN. It seems that Jim Acosta is itching for the fight. He's kind of becoming his own story. And then the question is at CNN.
That's a dangerous thing.
Well,
it is a dangerous thing.
And let's talk about that, because you got CNN, which is almost now in a siege mentality. You saw last week when they were out on the street on 58th Street in New York, and they just there was indignation, there was anger, there was resentment from the anchors as they're standing out there and thinking, well, because those who were in the building when they heard the alarm go off and had to evacuate, and we have been attacked. And now they not only become part of the story, but now do they have an edge, an agenda, a revenge factor in how they're saying what they're saying, and and isn't this exactly, if it were drawn up by, people who wish to tear us apart, whether it's internal or external, whoever knows it is. I mean, it's a great way to do this, is to really, I'm going to use a terrible example. I've used it before and I can't believe I ever got away with it, but there was an old fraternity hazing thing that, they would take the pledges and they'd put them all in a shower when I get them drunk, put them in a shower, and then tell them that they had to pee on each other. We're on the internet now, so I can say this stuff. I would get fined for saying this on the radio, and they'd all go,
"Is this in a Russian hotel room?"
This is. Oh, Rick, I never saw
fraternity. You said.
And what they would do is that then the pledge masters would then get turkey basers filled with warm water and start shooting each other and they would turn on each other and they'd start doing it. And that was the point, is that we're now in a point where somebody, sometimes it's the president, sometimes it's other people, we're being turkey basted. We're all turning on each other because it's in the best interest to get to disenfranchise certain people, to engage other people that you hadn't engaged before. And it's a scary time, because basically the ethics and the central things that put us all together don't exist anymore. There isn't a central vein of truth doesn't matter, because, who knows what's truth? You people have been lying forever.
Exactly. I think there is, when the president or whomever would make a comment that is not true, it is our job to say, yes, wait a minute, this is what he said, but actually, this is the truth. I don't think he can go unchecked. We can't let him go unchecked, or anyone unchecked. But there is this other aspect of it, of taking it further. But
if he throws out enough, or today in the press briefing, Sarah Sanders was press briefing today.
Second one in a month.
Right. October 3rd was her last one. She's up there and she said that, the president won a majority of Americans, voted for the president of the United States, and he won overwhelmingly.
Not true.
And do you stop and seize on that? I mean, there are so many things that you throw out. It's like chaff in the air, it's just so many. What do you hit on?
Yeah.
And you have to choose the important one, but what is the important one? And really, at the end of the day, do the American people care? Do they really, ultimately, are they engaging, or are they thinking, well, you're just being nitpicky? The economy is good. Unemployment is at historic lows. The stock market is at historic highs. Why don't you give them credit for that?
Well, there are a large number of people who choose to overlook the stuff that gets focused on a lot in the media and just looking at the overall picture and saying, look, the economy is good right now. You can't deny that. unemployment down, down, down. These are good things. I can live with this other crap because there are some good things that are going on in the country, for the country. And they want to ignore the other things.
Ignore his tweets.
Yeah.
Ignore his language. Ignore what he says about women. Of course, they say, but boy, we're all doing this great.
When the 2,500 jobs that have come back in the coal industry since he's become president, 2,500 jobs have come back in coal. When the coal miners in Western Pennsylvania and West Virginia and Eastern Ohio, when they actually don't see their towns starting to turn back around, but they keep hearing it's coming back, when that doesn't actually happen, what will be the fallout for, and I'm using them as just a microcosm of a grander kind of thing, because the economy, just on the natural, sine wave of this, is going to retrench at some point here. And then what? Because there are not a whole lot of bullets left in the gun.
Right. Well, what do you think? Will there be this big blue wave? I mean, we're going to see next week.
Who's asking the questions here, Marianne? Will there be this big blue wave?
But I mean, what you're saying is, how do we decide whether or not Trump is doing as well as he is? We're going to see next week. We're going to see whether folks are on board and want more of the same, or are they going to take a turn? And I think we're going to get a mixed bag. I don't think we're going to see necessarily a gigantic blue wave.
Blue wave or blue trickle or red trickle?
As I do all the time, I say when it comes to predictions, I suggest you ask Tom Skilling because he gets paid a hell of a lot more by Tribune than I do. So I don't do predictions. I will just tell you, obviously, we can see where the enthusiasm is. Whether that turns out into votes, that's the big question. And also the fact that you had Trump aides bemoaning the fact of the serial mail bomber and the Pittsburgh synagogue, and that was interrupting their Republican momentum. So,
I mean, the president so much said that, at least about the bomber.
Yeah. So when you talk about, for example, what happens in Appalachia when the coal mine jobs don't come back, if you're Trump, then it's those people in that caravan.
Right.
That's why
look over here.
Well, but it's the misdirect play. It will be blame illegal immigrants for taking your jobs, taking jobs from Americans, and that is adding to. They're bringing drugs. They're that
smallpox was a new one today.
Yeah, smallpox in the caravan. Right.
Yeah,
yes, I heard that.
You can bring smallpox in the United States. Now we're sending 5,000 troops. The thing that this is actually a momentous story, and there's so many every day. We set some new level of activity, and it's hard to make an editorial decision on what I think for news and for print for sure, because they've limited space and limited money. When you have 5,000 U.S. troops sent to the border, this is the first time that many U.S. federal. These are not National Guardsmen or reservists. These are active duty units moving. The United States, not since the Civil War, has moved that many active duty personnel to a single space. I mean, it's clearly they're not going to get here. They're moving them today. And they put out pictures today of troop carriers and planes and all this other stuff moving. The Pentagon released all of this. They're already en route, and we're already spending this amount of money. And this is what we're going to do. And don't worry about that. It's going to be fine.
We'll start disco dancing here in a minute.
That's exactly what we're going to do. Things are going great. You want to play with the light? Thank you. For those of you listening on the stream and don't understand, we have a light going insane. And a little bit later, I am a DJ. There is there's a real change here in terms of that's a big deal. And what do we do with it? Because my guess is that by next Thursday, they're going to start returning those guys back to their bases, because once the election is over, because by the time the Hondurans get to the border, they're 1,000 miles away walking on foot. It will take 40 days. They're doing about 25 miles a day. It'll take 40 days for them to be able to do that. It seems to me that there won't be an onus on this, because it's only going to be hundreds of people at that point who make it all the way through, because some of these people are pairing off in Mexico, which is, offering jobs to them. Do we cover this as a real story?
Well, I mean, it certainly has all the trappings of a political maneuver to, again, rev up the base before the election. I'm strong on illegal immigration. We're not going to let this happen. And I mean, you're right. They're so far out. I don't know what else you could, really look at it, because I don't think there's a threat they're going to overwhelm the border before Election Day.
Right. It's a story, but as you point out the various aspects of the story, and as far as the political ramifications as well. The trouble is, and going back to like cable coverage and things, and many good friends over the years at CNN, and still have great friends there, and I'm very disheartened about CNN because it's becoming, obviously they see where they have to go for their ratings, and just by putting any four people on a panel to talk endlessly about crap is pathetic. And there were a news network, and their bread and butter was covering the news. Not every 5 minutes to have a different panel of four people whose qualifications you couldn't find on a milk carton to show up.
But yeah, I think you raise a really interesting point, and it just makes me wonder. So I think Trump is smarter than people give him credit for, because he does things with great intentionality that we may not see or may not seem obvious. So if he sends the troops there, he not only gets the base riled up, I'm doing something, but he also is like tweaking the media, and he loves to tweak the media. So here he gives them something to just go nuts about, and it's like he's sort of puppeteering on the media.
Well, it's the bright, shiny object. It's the distraction kind of stuff, which he's also very good at too.
I think to Craig's point, he's a very stable genius, because he has figured this out. And I think there's a lot of intentionality to what he does. It's a gut instinct in a lot of ways. And the thing that's surprising is to not only the media, but also to his fellow politicians is, oh my God, I've always thought about doing that. I never thought I could get away with it. And he's getting away with it, right? He's getting away with saying or doing things that you're like, oh my God. But, they would, Barack Obama moved 5,000 troops to a border, with any, or to anywhere. People go, what are you kidding me? And I don't want to do all the whataboutism, but I'm going to tell you this right now. If Canada declared war on us, we would not put 5,000 troops on the border. Right? I mean, it's just not going to happen. So, all right.
Speaking of intelligent people, the last 15 minutes, we'll take some questions.
Yes. I want to do that right. And I was just going to pivot to that right now. Yes. No, are we going to take a break? Oh. Is there an Apple Chevy commercial I have to read right here? Because I will do it happily. But what I do want to do right here quickly is, I know you guys can't be in the prediction business because you're journalists. Luckily, I'm not burdened by that. But what I want you to do is tell me if I'm an idiot or a genius. Okay?
Are those the only choices?
Those are your only choices.
Okay. All right.
Wow. These are your only choices. Idiot or genius. Nationally, yeah. Federally, I think it's going to be a blue trickle at best.
The White House says that the president's final day visits are now going to be focused on U.S. Senate races, so therefore they've given up on the House.
Interesting. They believe that there's 25 House districts that might flip.
He is campaigning in areas that are not for congressional districts, but will get statewide attention.
Which means in Illinois, we could see the 6th and the 14th flip. That's pretty interesting. I'm with you. I think it's a trickle, but I've certainly been wrong before. I thought Kavanaugh was dead, so that didn't happen. So,
well, Kavanaugh was dead for exactly 1 hour, the lunch break.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And then he came back afterwards.
Like, okay, he's gone.
Yeah. And it is interesting. It is funny that we're not talking, it's funny how quickly all this moves. Kavanaugh seems like it was years ago, and it was only 3 weeks ago.
At least a six-pack.
Oh, by the way, I just wanted to weigh in. I will answer the question and say genius.
Thank you very much. That's exactly what you're supposed to say. And hopefully one of you will ask about Marianne getting chased around by Rahm Emanuel. Pat, you want to take it away here?
I have a question. I got to talk to this. Oh, Marianne, I got to follow up to you. J.B. Pritzker and Madigan. Why do you think they might not be twin brothers down there?
Oh no.
Because
Madigan is the power. Madigan is the guy. He's really the guff. So we've seen this before. Even though it might be a Democratic governor, he's still going to say, oh, well, let's wait a second here. I mean, graduated income tax. Well, you got to change. There's so many steps before we get to that to begin with. But he is certainly not going to give the Pritzker wish list and say, oh, sure, let's do that, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do that. They may get along together a little more. We're not going to hear all the bashing that we've heard.
We'll have budgets. We'll have state budgets. We'll have a government that functions. But I agree with Marianne. The most initial story, should Pritzker win, is going to be, what is the relationship between Pritzker and Madigan? Because Madigan does not give up control. I mean, quite frankly, for all of the Madigan bashing that goes on, one thing that he did was he provided an expert check on the power of Rod Blagojevich and some of the goofiness that could have really infected this state, because Rod had palled up to Emil Jones in the Senate, and Madigan put the block on that. He is the real governor, but that's going to be the real story if Pritzker wins.
And the other thing I think that is a factor, and I agree with both of what you guys are saying, is that the last thing that Pritzker can do if he becomes governor is look like Mike Madigan's puppet. So I would not be surprised to see him standing up against Pritzker, at least on some issues, so that he doesn't look like he's just curtailing and doing exactly what Madigan wants him to do. So I think there's going to be some tension there that's, whether it's real or manufactured, just to show that, I'm not going to just do everything he wants.
Is there going to be, there's a gigantic fiscal enema coming our way in 2020 and 2021. There's kind of a there are two things happening here. And you have not only the state, but the city about to get hit almost simultaneously within a couple months of each other in terms of big balloon payments that are due. Let's just deal with the state here. How are they going to be able to do that, even on a graduated income tax? I think the graduated income tax. If you look at economists, they will tell you that could have a very gigantic drag chute effect, and especially when we're talking about Amazon, which is not a magic pill here, but it's at least something. How do we get around that? How do those, if it is Pritzker, how do those two get around and create some way to save the state?
Well, first, on a graduated income tax, you wouldn't even have a chance to vote on it until 2020. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's remember that, even though Pritzker has talked about a pseudo graduated tax.
Explain why that.
Well, the Illinois Constitution requires a flat rate income tax. Our rate's 4.95% personal rate. To do a graduated tax, you would need a constitutional amendment. That is not an easy feat. You need 60% of the House to approve it. You need 60% of the Senate to approve it. And that's just to put it on the ballot for us to vote on. And it takes 60% of us to approve it. So,
and doesn't that have to be done in what would be the presidential election year?
And that would be in 2020. So, well, no, the constitutional amendments are exempt from the 3-item rule. They are. Trust me. Don't ask the governor that, because at one time he thought that he gets to sign constitutional amendments, and I had to remind him, no, governors don't have any role in Constitution.
Rick was there when they wrote the Constitution.
Pretty much. Yes, but constitutional amendments are exempt from the 3-proposition rule.
And yet 32 states do have a graduated income tax.
Including all of our neighboring states. Right. And so, but the bottom line, as far as that fiscal cliff, I think one of the first steps you're going to see, because so much of our money is tied up into the pension funding, is that we're going to do another kick the can down the road kind of thing and change that balloon payment.
But the problem with kicking the can down the road right now, interest rates are rising.
Problem.
Well, but interest rates are rising.
Sure.
The credit markets are tightening significantly. You might not be able to do it, or you might.
Well, this is an internal move. This does not require the bond houses or anything else to do. The Illinois does it on its own. In fact, the ramp that creates this balloon payment that's coming up is something that the state set. It's not subject to the bond houses or any of them.
We owe money.
We owe money, but we're not borrowing on it. We owe money to ourselves. We owe money to our own pension.
To the pensioners.
Yes,
I mean,
to ourselves.
Isn't there the possibility that they could just raise the income tax from where it is to make the initial round of payment that they've got to do?
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's quite likely what we're going to see happen.
Well,
first
and I mean, when the governor says a graduated income tax means everybody's going to pay more, I mean, that's entirely possible. More than likely, we're going to pay more anyway, no matter who's going to be governor.
Pat, have you handed the microphone to anybody?
Else question?
Anybody else have a thought in their head?
Sure. Thank you for being inconveniently located.
Is that the commercial?
We're kind of in this moment where we're talking about tomorrow. What happens when Mike Madigan finally leaves the stage?
Wow.
76.
Well, he's yes, indeed. And I hate to say it, but I mean, I was there when he first became speaker in Springfield, and that's a long time ago. But I don't know that the ideology changes. Certainly the fact of his strength and power and the money, and this might also be a factor too, should Pritzker win, is that it was Madigan's control was all meant on the power and the money. It was the cutback amendment, if you remember, that cut back the size of the Illinois House by a third. That's what helped make Mike Madigan who he was, because it invested all the power in those 4 legislative leaders. The Illinois House before then was the old 3-member system. You had 2 members from the majority and 1 member from the minority. You had to cut a deal. Everybody had to play. It was a rolling crap game back then. Then you had the cutback amendment because Pat Quinn is the world's smartest guy. And we're going to get rid of legislators. Who's not going to be for that? And what we do is we invest power then in the 4 legislative leaders, invest power in Mike Madigan, invest all the money behind these leaders to elect people. Now, should Pritzker win, you have a new funding source. So can you, as a Democrat, say to Mike Madigan, I'm with him. He's a billionaire. I know you got money, but I'll take his billion over you. That's all part of the tension watching that goes on. So as far as what Mike Madigan, though, if it's still a Democratic majority, there's going to be basic ideologies that are still going to hold true, regardless of Mike Madigan getting off the stage.
This is different, but somewhat. Everyone worried when Daley left in the city. Oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen in the Chicago? City councils are going to become wild. And it hasn't become wild at all. They've all gone with Rahm on most of the stuff that he's proposed. So I think it's somewhat like that of folks saying, "Ooh, wow, well, the state legislature, they'll just, wild rodeo." Probably not.
I mean, I think there's an opposite question. Should Bruce Rauner lose, is what happens to the Republican Party?
Yeah.
I mean,
we'll be talking about that, I'm sure.
I figured that was your commercial break for the City Club event that you're doing.
Pat, does that make you the head of the Republican Party again?
Well, let's look at it this way. What if Erica Harold wins?
Well, she is the face of the Republican Party.
Let's talk about that for just a second, because it does seem like she may be the only Republican.
Jim Durkin.
As well, statewide. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, good question.
No, what are her I was just say, what are her chances?
I told you for 6 months on his show that Donald Trump could never win, so like Rick, I'm out of the prediction.
I just want to say that Pat not only said that Donald Trump couldn't win, Pat would go, that guy's never going to win.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Kathy, you have a question?
I was saying, there has to be at least one statewide Republican candidate that can win, because the state at one point had all Republicans and as statewide office holders, and not that long ago, I guess, in relative terms. But, Erica Harold is really amazing, and there are lies in the commercials against her. But what are they saying these days about her campaign, at least? Because nobody else is getting traction.
Definitely closer from what we've heard, at least. But I don't know if we've seen concrete. And the polls, I mean, gosh, how many times have we been burned by the polls? But from what we hear is that race is closer than the governor's race.
I've always believed that it would be, and I've said to many people, I think perhaps the best political training anybody could get is to be Miss America, and I don't mean that in a negative way, because you are constantly in the public eye. You're constantly being asked, can I have a picture? You're constantly being asked questions about social issues. And she is a great candidate, absolutely great candidate. That having been said, I'm not so sure that Illinois, I think, as a state, and Chicago as a state, it tends to be too blue, and that's going to be, frankly, when she's out with commercials basically saying, if Pritzker wins, I'll be a check on Pritzker and Madigan. To me, that's throwing the guy who gave you $3 million under the bus, because I'm like, well,
how much did Ken Griffin give her? Because that has to be, he gave her a lot as well.
So,
but I did find that odd too.
Yeah, but when when you've got the Rauner, I recruited her so she could prosecute Mike Madigan, and now, well, forget him. I'm the only Republican that can win. That's really what the code is of that commercial.
But I mean, I think ultimately what could cost her the election is if Republicans are just looking at the governor's race and saying, you know what, it's really a lost cause. So if they're not going to go out and vote in larger numbers, kind of the flip-flop, if you will, of the Hillary effect with Trump, right? Hillary supporters thought, well, she's going to win, I don't have to go vote. And they didn't. And Trump's president. So she could suffer that same flip effect, if you will, if people are enthusiastic.
As well as those that, there was that poll a couple of weeks ago of Republican voters that believed that the chances of losing the House was fake news. Mm-hmm. So why worry?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and again, we're all subject to the haze of all of this now.
Right.
And even the polling, I mean, there's a guy that I used to run the Republican Party of the state of Illinois, who I had a lot of respect for until 2016, who said to me, he goes, whenever a pollster calls me, I lie to him immediately. Right. So.
Well, I mean, I ran the Tribune polling for many years, and quite frankly, we don't do it anymore because, one, it's prohibitively expensive to do. Two, the models are changing on it. But as far as issues about, I lie to pollsters and things like that, there are still several very reputable pollsters to look at. And the fact of the matter is, now everybody thinks they can do a poll, just like everybody thinks they can be a journalist.
Right. Frank Luntz. But
and focus
who was sitting in the front row of the Dodgers game last night?
Yeah. With Larry King.
There's reality though. The polls in 2016 were pretty accurate.
See, and that's the thing. People look, and that was the mistake. People looked at national polls and they forgot about the Electoral College. Mm-hmm. If you looked at the state by state polls, and even if you look at the national polls as far as what the outcome by vote was, they were within in that margin. Right. But that everybody forgets a presidential race is not a national poll.
Okay, before we does anybody else have a question? I
just had a really quick question about some of the negative advertising that we see, with the Erica Harold commentary, and I really liked her when we met her at one of the previous events that we had. And now we see this negative advertising. How do you go and find out what's truth and what's maybe not so much the truth to determine if what you thought you liked was the right thing that aligns with what you thought was?
Immediately go to the internet. That's what I did.
Just Google it.
Yeah, I know. At this point, those ads, I don't know about all of you, but I'm completely tuned out. I mean, of the ads. You're just like, really? I mean, how many times are they going to say all this? In her case, what she said when she was 19 became a big ad at the beginning, and perhaps she could have addressed it slightly better at the beginning and just said, hey, you know what did you say when you were 19? I said some kind of goofy things, and I wish I hadn't said that, and of course I don't believe that anymore. But they kind of did this whole hide for a few days until they finally got it together. But you're right. the negative ads do make you think, wait a second, is that, what am I supposed to, where do I go?
And it's like they repeat the same thing over and over and over again, as though by saying it enough times, it becomes true.
Yeah, the big lie. Where have we seen that before? But one of the things about Erica Harold, though, that I think is interesting about that particular situation is that she's also kind of blocked in that, because if she wants to clarify that, she takes away a piece of her own base. And so it's a checkmate move by Democrats to use that, because because the minute she comes off of it, especially in this winner take all moment in American politics, as well as local politics, there isn't a sense that, if you move, then there's always going to be people who are upset with whatever the change is. They don't want to see any kind of change. All right, really quickly before we go, the mayor's race,
I only do one election at a time.
I can't, because I don't think they're going to ask me to come back to this after that, because I've been drinking all the way through this. Do you think that does Chance the Rapper make a difference?
Of course he makes a difference.
Does he get
First,
her across
she has
the line?
to get on the ballot. Amara Anya. She has to get on the ballot first. Her petitions are going to be scrutinized very carefully. You can only sign one petition. You have to be a registered voter in the city. And you need, 12,500, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Yep. Yeah, which means you really need 25,000 to 30,000.
Yes, that ain't easy. So if she makes the ballot, that's a problem for Tony Preckwinkle, Lori Lightfoot, and others. So yes, he makes a big difference.
Okay. All right. Susanna Mendoza is your next mayor of the city of Chicago. There's your prediction right there. Take that to the bank. That's like a 10-1 right now. It's,
Were you asking for a genius or an idiot on that?
Yeah.
Bing bing.
I'm not endorsing her. I'm just saying that I think that I see everybody lining up for her right now. And she's the quiet candidate. And she already ran a commercial where she's wearing the Chicago flag on her soccer shirt. So
but what's interesting to see is how much money Bill Daley is building up and how quickly. I mean, he's the one bankrolling his account right now better than anyone. Now, will that continue? Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see who ends up in the runoff. That's for sure.
Yeah, because it only takes two. And I'm not running. Thank you for asking, though. I appreciate it. All right. On behalf of the Lincoln Forum, thank you all for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, yeah.